We all know that movement is like medicine, but getting the movement you need to feel better can be a challenge. Now you can keep fit while you sit with QB, the world's leading compact seated elliptical. QB gives you active sitting, letting you burn calories and keep moving in an easy and low-impact way, all while you work, read, or watch TV. QB was named the top 10 gift by Time Magazine and has been featured all over the world. It's whisper quiet while it works your abs and core, hip flexors, glutes, quads, hamstrings, and calves.
QB is a lifesaver. Here's your answer to your problem.
I feel young again.
Join the hundreds of thousands of people moving more with QB. Call to find out how to get your QB with free shipping and a 30-day complete risk-free trial. You'll also get this QB workout mat free. Now keep fit while you sit with QB.
To order, call 800-289-5820. That's 800-289-5820. Call now.
Good evening and welcome to our Foul and Richard French. Well, tonight, the vast majority of our program is going to be about law and order. Our panel of attorneys will join us to take a look at several stories, including the latest developments in New York's case against Donald Trump and his company, where a grand jury has been impaneled now to decide whether or not to file charges. But we begin with the litany of unanswered questions about the Capitol riot and the hopes for a bipartisan commission to get badly needed answers. For that, I want to bring in senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman with the very latest. Andrew?
And Rich, we should know within about 24 hours if a commission will happen or not. Right now, that depends on what happens or doesn't happen in the back rooms of the Senate. Democrats setting up a key procedural vote tomorrow afternoon, but right now, Republicans have more than enough votes to mount a filibuster to block it. Only 3 Republicans are on record saying they could vote for a commission, and let's call Susan Collins maybe. She says she wants changes that are unlikely to happen. Louisiana's Bill Cassidy also an on-the-record maybe. If there's a chance at movement, though, it may come from Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, the 2 Democrats opposed to filibuster reform. They put out a statement encouraging Republicans to back a commission, but there's been no public movement from the GOP since that statement went out. Rich?
Andrew, thank you very much. And for more on the politics of the commission vote, let's bring in ABC's political director, Rick Klein. Rick, talk about the significance about what Senators Manchin and Sinema said yesterday as it relates to either getting to 60 or maybe not needing to get to 60.
I think that was a shot across the bow of their Republican colleagues to say, look, this is the kind of thing that if you can't come to the table on this, then what can you come to the table on? And the language they used was carefully calculated. They're imploring their Republican colleagues. They're not threatening. But I think the message was pretty clear that this is something that, to their mind, is ripe for compromise, ripe for negotiation. If Republicans aren't willing to at least engage in that, there's very few options. So I don't think either of the senators have been communicated as there goes the filibuster if you block it. But I do think they're trying to say that, look, guys, we're trying to help you out here. We're trying to keep the filibuster and Senate rules intact, but that would mean having to support things that have common sense and even bipartisan support. And a commission to investigate January 6th would certainly meet that criteria. 35 Republicans in the House voted for it, even though President Trump and House Republican leadership came out strongly against it. That was a pretty strong bipartisan vote. And right now you've got Democrats just looking at the other side of the aisle and saying, what gives here? Can you possibly come to some kind of a compromise?
But in terms of the compromise, Rick, didn't the Democrats already give the church, if you will, and then they gave into all the concessions that were originally asked for to have an equal representation, the scope of the probe, et cetera. What more is there left to negotiate at this point?
Well, those negotiations were on the House side. The senators may have their own ideas. I think they can be more clear about hiring of staff, that it's a 50-50 split. This is just a 50-50 representation among membership. There's also concern about leading into 2022, into the midterm election year, even though the language in the bill is clear that it has to be done by December 31st. Perhaps they could make more clear that the funding runs out. There's another way to sunset it, to stop it. I think there's always a possibility, from the Senate's perspective, to make some changes. But you're right. Most of what Republicans wanted in terms of subpoena power requiring bipartisanship, in terms of that 50-50 split, in terms of the ending in 2021, they already got those things.
Rick, what I don't get is there were Republicans, Senator Burr jumps top to mind, who voted to convict the president And moreover than that, they're retiring. But yet they're not at least, there's only 3 Republicans I know, maybe you know of others, that are ready to say, yes, we need a commission. I mean, I asked this question, I know you follow as well as anybody what's on the ground, but you were there that day. How have we gotten to the point where even people who convicted the president, who impeached the president, aren't willing to even go on with a commission to this point?
Yeah, it's an extraordinary turn of events, and partisanship has a remarkable pull to have people like Senator McConnell, who didn't convict, but was clear in denouncing the former president's actions when he cast that vote. Part of that you would assume to be a way to look at this in a bipartisan manner. I think perceptions have changed, not just the folks who are very disingenuously rewriting history and suggesting that it wasn't as bad as thought, or maybe it was actually liberals that were behind it, or Antifa or something. You don't even have to go there. For the pull of partisanship to come back. And you're right. Republican retiring senators coming out against it right now. They're being told to stick together because it's going to hurt the Republican Party. And they've actually been remarkably explicit in the last few days in saying that the Democrats might just use this commission under the guise of bipartisanship to continue to hammer home the messaging around the last election.
It's amazing. I know we should be amazing more, but I guess I have to say I still am. Rick, always appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So the pushback on a riot commission, just another example, the GOP's growing embrace of the big lie, and also how the party is now becoming more and more Donald Trump's in all of its worst ways. So more on that, let's bring into that.
And Rich, we got the latest example coming out of Nevada, where a Republican feud has broken out into public over claims that members of the Proud Boys cast key votes as the party moved to censure one of their own. That official is Republican Secretary of State Barbara Sagatsky, who declared the election was fraud-free even after Joe Biden won there. A self-declared Proud Boy says he and others cast the deciding votes. Others say he had no business even being there. Other Republicans now want to audit that vote. Speaking of audits, the partisan unofficial recount continues in Maricopa County, Arizona. Still no idea when that effort is going to end. This all came from the GOP-led state Senate, whose president said something to CNN this morning that's worth some extra attention.
Can you honestly tell me, in all the states, that no ballots from people that are already deceased were not filled out and sent in?
That's the kind of statement partisans on each side can cling to, but that's not how election reviews work. You're supposed to need a reasonable amount of proof of election shenanigans and that there were enough of them to make a difference in the outcome to move forward. And when dead people vote, it's pretty easy to prove, like the guy in Colorado accused of murdering his wife, then sending in a pro-Trump ballot with her name on it. Finally, mounting calls for Marjorie Taylor Greene to be expelled from Congress after her latest offensive and embarrassing turn in the spotlight. She, of course, has been comparing mask requirements to the Holocaust lately, prompting House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy to condemn her comments 5 days later. But with MTG, it always gets worse. A Trumpist on Twitter responded to McCarthy's condemnation by calling him a feckless slur for a part of the female anatomy that nobody's mother should let them say. Taylor Greene then replied to that tweet, praising it and thanking the idiot for posting it. Rich?
I cannot believe every day where the Republican Party is going. Forget it against the American self-interest. It's against their own party's interest. It's nuts.
Every time you think they hit the bottom, you're proven wrong.
Andrew, thank you. When we come back, our legal panel will join us. We're going to kick things off with a look at how prosecutors in New York convened a grand jury for the case against Trump Organization and that man himself. We'll discuss what it means for the former president and his company.
This is important news for people who have taken Zantac or its generic ranitidine and then suffer from cancer. Zantac and generic ranitidine have been linked to cancers, such as bladder cancer and kidney cancer. According to the FDA, Zantac and ranitidine contain NTMA, a known cancer-causing agent. NTMA has been linked to cancers of the bladder, kidney, colon, esophagus, liver, ovaries, pancreas, and other cancers. If you or a loved one took Zantac or ranitidine and were then diagnosed with cancer, call the lawyers at Davis & Crump right now to see if you're eligible for a cash award and medical expenses. Call the lawyers at Davis & Crump right now if you or a loved one took Zantac or generic ranitidine and were then diagnosed with bladder cancer, kidney cancer, or any of these cancers. Call now to see if you're eligible for a cash award and medical expenses. Our first consultation is free, and we don't get paid unless you get paid. Call Davis & Crump right now. Operators are standing.
Here's an important message from the Diabetes Solution Center. Diabetics understand all too well the pain of pricking your fingers. But now, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can immediately reduce your pain. It's easy to use and helps you make more accurate diabetes treatment decisions. If you are testing your blood sugar 4 or more times daily, injecting insulin 3 or more times daily, or using an insulin pump, call the Diabetes Solution Center right now to learn about this groundbreaking new CGM technology. And if you have Medicare, you can get a new CGM at little to no out-of-pocket cost. Shipping is free, and we'll even bill your insurance company for you. If you are testing your blood sugar 4 or more times daily, injecting insulin 3 or more times daily, or using an insulin pump, call the Diabetes Solution Center right now to learn how you can get your own continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, at little to no out-of-pocket cost.
I didn't know some Medicare Advantage plans may pay for dental visits. Did you?
I didn't know some Medicare Advantage plans may pay for transportation to my doctor. Did you?
I didn't know some Medicare Advantage plans may pay to have my prescriptions delivered directly to my home. Did you?
These and more are important benefits some Medicare Advantage plans may give you. So if you're eligible coverage, home delivery of drugs, even gym memberships. Some plans may include no co-pays for many services and zero deductibles. Don't wait to find out if you're eligible to enroll in a plan that may include some of these wonderful benefits you deserve. Call us right now. The call is free, the information is free, and there's no obligation. Make this free call now to learn if you're eligible to enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan that may include additional benefits you want. Call us right now.
Welcome back. We're going to spend the balance of the show taking a look at big legal cases making news. I want to start by introducing our panel, and I'm excited to say they're around the table with me. Jim Koutsouras, criminal defense attorney, vice president of the New York City Criminal Bar Association. Doug Von Oys, founding partner of Carson Von Oys, focusing on corporate misconduct, and was selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the nation. He graces us with his presence. And Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC, former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. All right, first on the docket, guys, huge developments in the New York criminal investigation into none other than the Trump organization. The nearly 2-year-long criminal investigation into former President Donald Trump's business dealings now intensifying. A special grand jury has been seated by the Manhattan DA to consider evidence and ultimately decide if the Trump organization, Trump himself, his family, or employees have committed crimes. The DA launched the investigation based on the congressional testimony of Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen.
To your knowledge, did the president or his company ever inflate assets or revenues?
Yes.
And was that done with the president's knowledge or direction?
Everything was done with the knowledge and at the direction of Mr. Trump.
Grand juries are secret, but the investigation is believed to be looking into Trump's tax returns and whether he overvalued his properties to obtain bank loans and deflated the value of those same properties to pay lower taxes. We've learned that prosecutors have already contacted witnesses to appear before the grand jury, which will reportedly be meeting 3 days a week for up to 6 months. Experts say the move suggests prosecutors feel they have evidence of a crime and are preparing to move forward with charges. The former president releasing a statement calling the new developments a witch hunt, saying in part, quote, "This is purely political and an affront to the almost 75 million voters who supported me in the presidential election, and it's being driven by highly partisan Democratic prosecutors." New York Attorney General Letitia James has now joined forces with the DA's office.
Our civil investigation continues, but we are now actively investigating the Trump organization in a criminal capacity.
All right, and Jimmy, I'll start with you. This is not about he said, she said. They got documents, and everyone I've spoken to, and you guys are close to this, but every former federal prosecutor said this is really bad in terms of the move they're making now, given the documentation, given the returns, given so much more. Trump has very good reason to be worried.
Look, I agree, but I will tell you that these are not easy cases to prove. If they do have documentation as to the inflating of values of properties, and then closely behind that or in front of that, the deflating of the values in order to avoid paying taxes on them, then that is very compelling evidence. They've been investigating for a long time. You will recall all of the litigation that they went through in order to get the tax returns. It appears as though those tax returns were a very important component of it. But I think that what's going on is that they're able now perhaps to put a voice to that paperwork. When you have a white-collar case like this that's document-centric, it is always very important and beneficial to have a voice explaining those documents, explaining how they were cultivated, why they were cultivated, at whose direction they were cultivated. So it looks to me as though they're putting those two components of the case together and they're ready to go forward.
And Doug, listen, at the end, it's about convincing a jury, assuming there's indictments that come out of this and it goes to trial. But because of the defendant or the defendants, whether it be the organization or the extended families, I said there, is it beyond just the jury room in that they've got to lay out a consumable case for the American public because you have an ex-president on trial, that this isn't just some clerical error that they're looking to do gotcha, that there was intent, this was long-standing that this was going on, and this was something that you, I, or the next guy couldn't do or wouldn't do? Do they have to make this easy to understand about how serious the allegations are?
Well, I think with anyone who's a potential public figure, and certainly an ex-president is, in the background of any jury trial that you would have is the fact that he was president. And is this being done, the prosecution is being done for a reason other than a vindictive reason. You heard Letitia James say her civil case now is going to be coupled with the criminal case. With a case like this, there's a lot of things that could go wrong that would be considered civil problems. This is a large organization. You still have to prove intent, criminal intent, not civil mistakes. And that's going to be a big hurdle in a case like this.
Logistically, Mayo, and I got 3 former prosecutors with me, explain what it means where you have the Manhattan DA, now you got the state attorney general doing this, you got Cy Vance with an expiration, he's not running for re-election. What does the timeline tell you and the fact that they're working together?
Well, the fact that they're working together tells me that the president, former president, should really be concerned, because whenever you have a coordinated investigation from 2 major prosecuting offices, one that has the virtually limitless resources of the state of New York, the other that is New York City, you have to consider the fact that they're going to be sharing information, they're going to be sharing documents, they're going to be combing through these documents. And then there are a lot of also potential felonies that exist in the state, such as offering a false instrument for filing, which is a Class E felony. And they can run cumulatively. So if you find that they've filed false documents hundreds of times, thousands of times, and perhaps you have multiple employees also engaging in the filing of these false documents, which they may know are not accurate, those are all potential witnesses against Donald Trump and the organization. And these are people that prosecutors probably would not be interested in going after per se on their own, but they might say, hey, well, what do you know? And when you start to look at the documents, they're really not subject to personal whim. They don't really have an agenda. The documents are what they are. If I value a piece of property at $50 million today, and then this time next year it's $75 million, and no other similarly situated properties have that type of swing, it's a pretty easy thing. And at that point, the trier of fact, whether it's a judge or a jury, can infer intent. Now, as Doug says, and I think it's essential that we remember that he's innocent until proven guilty, the organization is innocent until proven guilty, and that should be the case for everyone, and we should never shatter that unless the prosecution shatters it. But it's a lot of evidence that's potentially out there. We're probably looking at terabyte and terabyte of documents that they're going to have to go through. It'll require a team that has particular expertise to really defend him well.
And you have also a lot of financial institutions that were part of this over the years. Deutsche Bank, and I can go up and down the list here, that aren't going to lie for the president for their own fears of exposure. Jimmy, there's a name that people are starting to hear about, but could be seismic if he's either compelled to cooperate or does so out of choice, and that is Mr. Weisselberg.
That's right.
You already have a spurned ex-daughter-in-law who's already said, listen, Trump wrote a basic check, but maybe because he was too cheap or trying to get around it, he would give gifts in kind that were never declared or otherwise here. Weisselberg goes back to Fred Trump, the old man. He knows where everybody's buried. And if the kid or the extended family could be facing some real trouble and he flips, then you got real worries if you're Trump on top of the concerns now.
That's what I was saying before. And to Mayo's point, yes, you can infer certain things from what documents say. You're not going to cross-examine the document. But you do need, as the question to Michael Cohen was posed, knowledge and intent. And with just a document, the defendant Trump can say, look, you know, I'm at the top. There's no way I control everything that's going on. If this gentleman flips, this man has an encyclopedic knowledge of the Trump organization from its inception throughout. And this is a man who dealt directly with the president, took his orders from the president, and was responsible for the creation and submission of many of these documents.
And there is another thing which I know. Listen, people go to jail for fraud every day in this country, okay? So it's not like, you know, they're creating basically a charge that's unique here to this president. But if it's tactile, if people understand what this fraud is and they say, wait a minute, I can't do that when I got to pay my taxes in April in a normal year, what's he doing? And it's not even that. It's also stuff like gifting this or that or the other thing, or using the Trump Foundation or the organization or whatever it is to do really shady stuff and screw people out of other things. If that comes out, even the defenders of the president, it becomes a lot less sympathetic when you can touch it. And I think that's part of the case that the prosecution has to make here, more than just the dollars and cents, if they want a broadly accepted verdict. But we're going way down the line. Okay, when we come back here, we're going to discuss an anniversary that just passed, but what has changed or not changed over the past year? Police reforms happening in the wake of George Floyd's death, and how close Congress is to passing sweeping legislation to address issues when it comes to law enforcement.
IRS, open up.
The IRS is the most feared agency in the country and has the power to seize assets, garnish wages, and even put you in jail for back taxes and unfiled tax returns. Don't be a victim. Call Kick IRS right now and let us kick those IRS problems out of your life once and for all. Our powerful team of tax experts will fight hard for you and will not stop until we've resolved your tax problems on your terms. And if you qualify, we may even reduce or eliminate your tax debt altogether. No more sleepless nights wondering when the IRS is going to come after you. Take control of your tax problems today and make the phone call. We have an A rating with the Better Business Bureau, and we offer a 100% written guarantee, so there's nothing to lose and everything to gain. The consultation is free and the phone call is free. So pick up the phone right now and kick those IRS problems out of your life once and for all.
Call 1-800-719-3527 to get the tax help you need today. Again, that's 1-800-719-3527 or go to kickirstv.com.
When you fall and can't get help, you will lie on the floor for hours or days in constant, terrible anguish, which often results in a tragic outcome. But with Life Alert, one touch of a button can get you help fast.
Don't worry, help is on the way.
With any of Life Alert's 3 emergency systems, help can be summoned immediately, whether at home,
I've fallen and I can't get up.
in the bathroom,
I've fallen in the shower.
or on the go.
Help! I'm in the park and I can't get up.
And batteries never need charging. Life Alert saves a life every 11 minutes.
For a free Life Alert brochure, call 1-800-215-6582. That's 1-800-215-6582. Call now. 1-800-215-6582.
This is an advertisement for legal services. Important news for farm workers and others exposed to the weed killer paraquat and who were later diagnosed with Parkinson's disease or told by a doctor they might have Parkinson's disease. Studies say those exposed to paraquat sold under these brand names and others have an increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease or Parkinson's-like disease. If you or a loved one worked around the weed killer paraquat and were then diagnosed with Parkinson's disease or told by a doctor you might have Parkinson's disease since exposure, call the law offices of Davis & Crump right now at the number below to see if you are eligible for a cash award and medical expenses. Call the law offices of Davis & Crump right now if you or a loved one were exposed to paraquat and were then diagnosed with Parkinson's disease or told by a doctor you might have Parkinson's disease. Call Davis & Crump right now to see if you're eligible for a cash award and medical expenses. Our first consultation is free, and we don't get paid unless you get paid. Call now. Operators are standing by.
I've spoken with the negotiators. I'm hopeful that sometime after Memorial Day we'll have an agreement on the George Floyd legislation, and so I'm optimistic.
That's the president talking about the police reform bill that he was hoping would have hit his desk by yesterday, that the anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. It's already passed the House, and the lead Senate negotiators, Democrat Cory Booker and Republican Tim Scott, they also are optimistic.
Well, I think it's more likely than not. We've made a lot of progress. I think we can get something really meaningful and substantive done that will save Black lives.
But I think we're making the kind of progress that we need to make.
And can you actually see that you're going to reach a compromise? Feel confident?
I think I should only speak about what I'm completely confident of, and I'm confident that we're making progress.
Now, the bill that got through the House, it would ban chokeholds and no-knock warrants and also create a national database listing incidents of police misconduct, among other things. But the biggest sticking point of now, as we understand it, is qualified immunity. That's what shields police from most civil lawsuits. Democrats, they want to roll back qualified immunity. Republicans, they've raised concerns saying it could cause cops to face floods of lawsuits that will impair their ability to fight crime. Talk about qualified immunity. Is there a middle ground here where you don't, every single time there's an arrest, it turns into possible litigation that has to be defended? Is there some place there in the middle? As mentioned before here, you've been on both sides of this.
Absolutely, and we do civil rights work as well. The reality is that out of all the people who call us with civil rights claims, there are very few that we're able to actually take. And sometimes we look at it and we may say, look, the police didn't do anything that would be wrong under the law here. But you still have a burden. Just as a prosecutor has a burden in a criminal case, you've got to be able to meet your burden in order to win. When you look at qualified immunity, the thing that's fascinating to me is that it basically is a creature of the Supreme Court. And many of the people who are in support of it are against activist courts. But for an activist court, we wouldn't even have the doctrine of qualified immunity. And what it basically does is it says that if you can find any reasonable officer out there who might have acted the way you did, that you should be shielded. So I tend to think that if we look at liability in terms of the municipality covering officers for mistakes, just as we would for insurance, if it's negligence, then you should be covered for that mistake. But also imposing some liability on the part of the police officers when they engage in misconduct that's intentional or reckless, like a Derek Chauvin, or perhaps like the officers who lied about what happened and claimed that I forget the gentleman's last name, but that he passed away as a result of an automobile accident instead of that we beat him to death. Well, those people should not be covered by qualified immunity. They should not be covered based upon the municipality having to have the total burden in terms of liability. In those cases, they should have to indemnify the municipality and say, look, you know what, we've engaged in this wrongdoing, in this misconduct, and now we're going to pay you back, because why should the taxpayers bear that burden?
You guys have kept, I know, relationships with people still on the law enforcement side. As I mentioned before, you guys have all been prosecutors now on the defense side. We have had an overdue reckoning in the last year in terms of that there are two different forms of justice depending on color of skin. And I think even for people who weren't sure of that, it's hard to argue that. But the question is, when I look at the numbers for the violent crime spikes, and you look at where they're centered, particularly in inner cities and communities of color where this is spiked, have we run the risk that the very people who need the most amount of protection right now, and there's millions of reasons as to why or why not, that protection may be jeopardized because that there is a reconsideration of what law enforcement should or shouldn't be doing right now, and it's having an impact on getting into those areas and creating safety?
You know, I do worry that law enforcement, that police with boots on the ground are going to say, I'm not going there, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that, because if I get into a situation, then I'm going to be charged with a crime or whatever. But I don't think it's very difficult to understand that you don't beat somebody to death, you don't abuse people, that's not necessary, and that nobody is asking you to not do your job and to not react to a dangerous situation proportionally and the way you are trained. And so I think that really what it all comes down to, however we land here, training is important. Getting rid of those who are not doing it the right way, those who are intent on committing these acts, getting rid of those officers is the right way to do it. But we need training. It is not difficult for anybody to understand that you need to treat people with respect. And
I agree.
Think anybody is saying
there are certain
don't react.
stories where you have 6 people in a room and 3 people will say, well, 3 in the morning, it's dark out, you don't know what the guy's got in his hand. Of course, I understand what the cop did, and 3 other people saying, wait a minute, you know, he didn't or she didn't have to pull the trigger to do that. We still get into a subjective area. I'd like to know from all you guys, and it's interesting, I'm hearing conversations about maybe we want to re-examine which crimes either require force or even pursuit. And I think that brings up a whole host of debates as to unintended consequences. If you're not going to, let's say, chase a stolen car, or if there's petty theft, if you choose or not to pursue. But give me, and I'll start with you, Doug, give me a meaningful piece of reform that you think would make overall justice better.
I mean, Rich, everything should be reformed on a daily basis, not only in law enforcement, but everything we do. You should be constantly re-examining everything, trying to do anything that's done, you should try to do it better on a daily basis. You know, I'm thinking about these cases. It's very easy when we look at George Floyd to say what we saw was horrible, it was terrible. Where the rubber meets the road is the minor cases, where you have a police officer out there who's he arrives at somebody's house and he's trying to break up a couple in an argument, and there's a small child there, and he's trying to keep the child safe at the same time, and then something happens. That doesn't fit squarely into a training program. There's a certain amount of discretion that goes involved. This is not a computer program that you can put in A, B, and you get C. You have to give a certain amount of discretion to the people that are in the field, and at a certain level you have to understand that things do go wrong, and not everything that goes wrong is a criminal act, and not everything is a huge civil case.
And I want to ask you the same question. Give me one proposed reform. And do you think that from a year ago to now, you've seen tangible progress, or you've heard a lot of words, but we're still right back where we were before?
I've seen tangible progress, and I think that there's a lot more to come. One of the things that I think has been tremendous is ABLE, and that's the active bystandership for law enforcement. And what that does is it empowers every single person in the organization to be accountable to every other person. So you could be the new hire, and you are able to step in and to intervene if you see the chief engaged in misconduct. And it deals with officer wellness. It also deals with the wellness of the community. And if they go hand in hand, I think that it goes a long way toward addressing these issues.
And even in a certain way, we saw that in Minnesota with a dispatcher who called in and said, call me snitch if you want, but I see something wrong here.
Right.
Real quickly, same to you. Give me a reform that you think, if a year from now we sat down here, you'd say that made a difference.
I think that qualified immunity should be non-existent for criminal acts that are proven. I think that that would have a deterrent effect. I think that in the beginning there needs to be implemented some very significant training. And I think that within the training, when it comes to those more minor crimes, there need to be very strict guidelines as to how to proceed. I really do think that with the appropriate training, you're not going to be in a position where you're opening a door into a dark room where, of course, you don't know what the person has or doesn't have. The appropriate training, which is in place now, should tell you you don't open that door. You take appropriate steps before you open that door. And good training is going to show police officers, or at least help them not be in that position.
And I'll say this, I haven't heard anybody who says get rid of policing.
No.
That's crazy. No. But maybe a reconsideration of what's the best use of resources, where maybe you do want a mental health specialist on staff to be going with the cops in the field here to help diffuse it. So there's a lot of different ways, but I take it that we are in a better place than we were a year ago, still with a long, long ways to go. All right, we come back lightning round. 3 guys here, 3 different stories, all involving COVID. We'll take a look at legal issues surrounding the pandemic in the workplace, the courts, and basically any place where people gather.
Villains, robbers, bandits, crooks, they're all over your TV screen. But the biggest thieves are behind your screen. I'm talking about the cable companies. They charge monthly subscriptions, fees, rentals, and force you to take long-term contracts. Well, it's time to say goodbye to the cable guy, because now you can watch 4K Ultra HD broadcast TV for free. Introducing Clear TV's new 4K Ultra HD design, the Premium HD. Just plug it into your TV and start watching for free. You will instantly receive top-rated network shows, local news and weather, sporting events, and even Ultra HD 4K broadcast shows, all for free. Thanks to federal government mandate, all broadcasters are required to transmit a digital TV signal through the airwaves. The new Premium Clear TV lets you bypass cable or satellite to bring network and 4K broadcast shows directly to your television. Retract the antenna to keep it small or extend them for maximum reception.
Setup was so easy. I took my Clear TV antenna, plugged it into the back of the TV, and now I can watch my favorite broadcast channels anywhere in the house for free.
We're just off the coast here in the Gulf of Mexico receiving free network broadcast HD TV. Imagine all the free shows you'll receive at home. Basic cable and satellite services can cost you up to $80 a month. That's $960 a year and almost $10,000 over a 10-year period. Watch TV in as many rooms as you like with no additional monthly fees. Stop spending money you don't have to spend. Call or go online now and get your premium Clear TV 4K Ultra HD antenna for only $19.95. It's backed by our 60-day money-back guarantee. Order now and you can add a second Clear TV free. Just pay separate processing and handling. That's a $40 value for only $19.95.
I can't believe I get all these channels for free. Plus 4K Ultra HD, Clear TV is for real.
Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, a name you know and trust as the perfect solution for you. We call it the tub to shower conversion. We'll remove your old bathtub and the need to step over a dangerously high threshold, replacing it with the safety and luxury of a low-profile walk-in shower. And all this in about a day. As a special bonus to you, you'll get a special extra safety feature for free. So please call now.
And welcome back. This segment, legal issues surrounding COVID. I got 3 different topics. Each of them gets one. I want to start with Doug. And when it comes to employment law, Doug, as people return to the workplace, companies start hiring, there's a lot of challenges, including vaccine requirements, masking, to name a couple. So what does employment law say as to whether or not a company can say, listen, you want to come back through the doors, you got to have a vaccine? And what about employees who say, listen, I came back, right, but they didn't have the right rules in place, and you're putting me at risk?
So you're going to hate this. It's not clear cut. So you have to think about existing employees and you got to think about new hires. Those are 2 separate groups. And of course, we've discussed it many times on this show. You can't discriminate according to race, religion, gender. So if you're doing it for that reason and you're just saying it's because of a COVID vaccination or something, then you could get in trouble. But as you know, at hospitals now, you have hospitals where the employees there are required to take a flu shot before they're an employee at the hospital. That's a requirement. It would be similar to that. So if there is no constitutional right that I can identify that you have a right not to be vaccinated. So it looks like it's going to be
private and public. There's a distinction with a difference, right, employers?
Well, there is a distinction although if you're talking about race, religion, gender.
No, I'm just saying if private company says, listen, you come back to work, you know, in the dentist office, I'll make this up, everybody's got to get a vaccine or else you don't have your job. But if you're a public company, let's say you're the DOT, is it different?
But it's not clear because sometimes a company has sort of straddles the fence on that. And you go up to one employee and ask him whether he's vaccinated, but you don't go to everybody else in the company. There's a lot of, the fact patterns are going to be different and they're going to hold.
Let me go to Mayo next. You got 50 different sets of rules basically when it comes to vaccines, masks, what the public and business can or can't do. What happens if somebody gets COVID? Is it buyer beware, or do they have some kind of legal recourse against a business or even a local government? And I ask that because, you know, some states there's a certain amount of fans that are allowed into the stands. Go to Texas, every seat they can do. You don't even have to wear a mask right now. Or you walk into a mall, and what expectation do you have at this point that my governor, my county executive, whoever is acting in my best interest as it relates to my health?
For the most part, I think it's going to be an assumption of the risk. So if you walk into an establishment and you don't feel safe, then you have an obligation not to go into that establishment. On the other hand, if you're required to be there, then it's a different story. So let's assume you're going to a health center, and it's the only health center that exists. I think that there would be a path toward liability where officials overstep their bounds. So if you have an official who doesn't have background, doesn't have information, or makes a decision that's contrary to the information that's already available, at that point, they may open themselves up to liability.
But what happens, because we're working on an honor system of sorts. I've been double vaccinated, and the rule in certain places are if you're double vaccinated, you don't have to be, but if you're not, you got to wear a mask. What if you can actually prove that somebody got exposure to COVID because a person that was supposed to be masked knowingly didn't mask and expose that person to it? Can you, if you're going to enjoy a public benefit and you don't do your part in terms of as a community compact, can you now, if you're not following guidelines, be held accountable?
Well,
So-
I think that it's an interesting argument. We have cases that were similar to that with HIV, where people knew that they were HIV positive and had unprotected sex and exposed someone to HIV. But here, I think you'd also have to show not only did the person not wear a mask, but that they were aware that they were COVID positive. And I think you could make that same argument if they had other diseases, but it's going to be very difficult to be able to show that and to have someone there and say, look, I knowingly exposed people to this agent.
Jimmy, this next one goes for the legal system, and obviously there's so many different parts to this, but we have seen, we talked about in the show through Zoom, about how courtrooms were shut down, people's cases put on hold ad infinitum here, couldn't get their day in court, evidence gets cold, eyewitness recollections get fuzzy. Where are we now? And how backlogged is the system? I mean, you were saying you're as busy as you've ever been here, but the wheels of justice, are they turning?
They're starting to turn. They're starting to turn. I will commend the system for its ability to keep appearances going with Zoom and motion practice and at least moving the cases towards trial at a reasonable pace. That didn't need to be slowed down. Where the backlog is in the actual litigation in the criminal trials. And we are starting up again. It's just that every courthouse has only a couple of rooms, a couple of courtrooms that are outfitted for trials. And you've got over 1,000 backlog, you know, in trials in the metropolitan area.
Does the edge in these cases go to the prosecution or defense in terms of, as I said, witness recollection, fuzzy memories? I mean,
look, I will tell you that time is usually, as we always say, on the side of the defense. The more time that goes by, the harder it is for the people to prove their case because, again, witness recollections, witnesses disappear and all. On the other hand, the structure of the courtrooms is far less personal. Our art, if you will, is more about theater and the ability to move around and to talk to jurors and stuff. So it's really hard to say. The only problem that I am seeing is that, you know, priority needs to be given to the defendants who remained incarcerated over those that weren't. And I find that a lot of courts, a lot of counties, they just want to come out and say, we did a trial, we're doing trials, we're doing trials. And I just think that we need to prioritize the people who have been sitting in jails in isolation, in constant quarantine, without seeing their families, without social visits. We need to give them their day in court, even if it's at the expense of people who are at liberty, because it has been torturous for many of these individuals.
And I would just say, as Jimmy was saying about the theater of this, I just thought of Jimmy in a miniature Grizzly Adams version with that beard. Gentlemen, thank you. When we come back, stay with me, because you're going to want to see this. A rare look inside the room of a grand jury. The transcripts have been released for a high-profile case of a man who died after getting forcibly restrained and arrested upstate New York. I'm going to be speaking to the New York Times reporter who's analyzing it. It's a fascinating look behind the curtain. Stay with us.
Shake your legs, shake your abs, shake your butt, shake up your entire body to a slim, firm, and sexy new you with PowerFit Elite, the breakthrough multi-directional vibration platform that helps engage all your muscles from the moment you step on it. PowerFit uses multi-directional vibration to create muscle confusion and rapidly contract and relax your muscles to help you get fit and stay fit.
It's intense. You really feel your whole body working. You could be watching TV, but you do feel the workout.
It works you out where you don't feel like you're working out. It's actually a lot of fun.
Each traditional exercise that you do on PowerFit Elite can help sculpt, transform, and redefine your body from head to toe. The secret is the multi-directional vibration technology that causes muscle confusion and forces them to contract and counter-challenge you. Your muscles work hard so you can stabilize and maintain your balance. There are 3 standing positions: walking, jogging, and then running. Plus, there are 3 different program levels for workouts to choose from, so you can really customize your workout. PowerFit Elite can help improve your energy, burn calories, tone your body, define your abs, work your arms, strengthen your legs, boost your buttocks, and so much more. And for an even more intense workout, add resistance bands for bicep curls, forward lateral raises, and crisscross pulls. It's time to join the new fitness revolution that's shaking up the world. Call or go online now and you can try PowerFit Elite in your home for 30 days for only $14.95. But wait, order right now and we'll upgrade you to the deluxe set that includes the complete workout guide, the power bands, and the handy remote control. That's an over $80 value free. Try PowerFit Elite in your home for 30 days. And if it's not the best workout system you've used, just return it for a refund of your trial price. But hold everything, we'll also add our healthy eating plan to help you achieve your best possible results free. Try PowerFit Elite in your home for 30 days for only $14.95 and experience the power of extreme vibration. Order now.
Attention timeshare owners. This is an urgent consumer alert from the Timeshare Exit Hotline, a national company specializing in helping consumers legally get out of their expensive timeshare contracts. We're offering you a way to legally get rid of your timeshare. So if you're fed up with the maintenance fees that keep on coming and want to learn if you can terminate your timeshare legally and permanently, call today. Call the number on your screen today. It's a free call.
And welcome back. In this segment, we're going to discuss 2 issues that we've already spoken about this hour as they converge in one particular incident. I'm talking about grand juries and also holding police accountable, and how both of those, they came into play in the tragic death of Daniel Prude last year. Prude, as you may remember, died after police in upstate New York had to use force to arrest him, putting a hood over his head and pressing his face into the pavement. They responded to a call about a naked man running in the street and yelling that he had had COVID, and they say restraining him was the only option at the time available to them. The medical examiner determined that Prude's death was caused because of several factors, including oxygen deprivation as well as PCP drug intoxication. Now, several officers, they were suspended after the incident, and then Attorney General Letitia James convened a grand jury. But none of the officers wound up getting indicted, and James said afterwards that she was disappointed by the outcome. Now, grand juries are by nature very secretive, but the transcripts to this one, they were released to the public, and they paint, well, let's just say a complex picture. The analysis by the New York Times says that attorneys in the AG's office presented both sides of the case, which is unusual as prosecutors usually present just one side in hopes of securing an indictment. They also called witnesses that both defended the officers and those who said that they used unreasonable force. At least one juror says that they were confused and struggled to reconcile the contradictory testimony. Well, my next guest co-wrote that piece in the Times, staff writer Sarah Mazlinier. She joins us now. And I got to admit, I thought it was fascinating, the reporting, but I'm even more confused than when I started with this. We've all heard the expression, you know, you can indict a ham sandwich when talking about it. But are the rules different for police, or are they unwritten rules that the Attorney General chose to follow in putting up both sides when she was only required to put up hers?
Well, when the ham sandwich is a police officer, you have very different outcomes. 1,000 people are killed a year in the United States at the hand of police officers. Only about 1/3 of those officers are ever indicted, and a small proportion of those lead to a trial and conviction. So it's a really different beast when an officer is involved. And that's because of a number of reasons. But one of the largest is that officers are allowed to use a measure of force in their job. You and I can't restrain anyone, but officers have to. So there is wide leeway given when officers do use force. And also, jurors tend to give police credence. They don't necessarily side with them, but they are more understanding of what it takes to do their job and often rule in favor of them. But when these cases with grand juries involve something as thorny and involute as a police officer using force, it is not that unusual for prosecutors to really throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And that's what happened here. Prosecutors from Tish James' office, they used many different witnesses. As you said, one said, definitely, these guys used exactly what they were trained to do, and there was no misuse of force. And another wasn't so sure. And in those secret transcripts that were revealed, unusually at James's request, actually, you see the jurors struggling to reconcile the two. And this was used almost as a testing ground to see what would happen in trial. How would juries react to multiple sides of information?
So you hit on a couple of things that I'm still at a loss for. One is, when I was finished with the piece, I was wondering, well, how did these grand jury records get out? Letitia James chose to put them out. And she also chose, when there wasn't a decision by the grand jury to indict, that she said she was disappointed, extremely disappointed. Well, if she was extremely disappointed, why did she choose the witness list that you just described that would imperil at least an indictment to get to the trial phase? So I guess it could be one of two answers. One is at least the public face, that you say, well, you know what, this is what a grand jury is supposed to be. You're supposed to give a complete picture to the jurors so they can make up their mind. Or more practically, that's not what usually happens. Was this just a different choice in a selective one because it was cops at the grand jury phase?
Well, we asked those same questions of Ms. James, and she granted us an interview because, especially to advocates in Rochester who really wanted justice for Daniel Prude, and to them that looks like a conviction for the officers that effectuated his death, those words of extreme disappointment rang extremely hollow. Exactly what you said. One of the people that James called to the stand was an officer who actually later went on, an expert who later went on to say he probably wouldn't have convicted Chauvin in George Floyd's case. And actually, the Attorney General has said those subsequent words would have made her rethink the choice of him. But he's a known police defender. And yet, Ms. James, in our interview, said, we set out to present information and figure out if there were charges that could be brought here. Ultimately, she said, following that 45-hour exhaustive investigation before the grand jury, thousands of pages of which were released, they felt they could have brought charges. And she did feel she would have been successful at trial had the jury decided to indict these officers. That didn't happen.
You know, in your reporting, you spoke to a lawyer for one of the officers that also was given the opportunity to testify before the grand jury, which was a choice by the prosecutors. Michael Sciano, an attorney for one of the officers, he said, prosecutors put on the case that we would have put on anyway. They put on the witnesses we would have put on if there was a jury trial. I guess what I'm trying to get my arms around, Sarah, is, was this completely irregular, what happened in Rochester, or is this the norm when a cop's on trial at the grand jury phase?
Well, that's super hard to answer because of the very nature of grand jury proceedings. They're secretive. They are not required to release them, unlike almost every other type of trial and situation involving the courts, which are in this country public. Grand jury proceedings are secret. So we don't have a lot of basis for comparison. However, my colleague Nicole Hong and I spoke to experts who have testified on these cases all over the country, and they said it's not that unusual for a multiplicity of perspectives to be presented when it's an officer. And it's a special circumstance because, again, the law shows that officers are permitted use of force in the course of their duties. Actually, right before our story came out, James proposed legislation that would sharply curtail or delineate what does use of force mean. Right now, it's an amorphous word that gives officers a lot of permission. And so she said, until the law changed and makes this a little bit of a more curtailed use of force, you're going to keep running into what she ran into in this case.
Well, it's a fascinating look behind the curtain, if you will. Sarah Neer, appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up.
This is important news for people who took certain drugs for HIV and then suffered serious injury to their kidneys or bones. Your HIV drug could have contained TDF, an ingredient known to increase the risk of kidney disease and kidney failure. TDF has also been linked to bone fractures, bone density loss, and softening of the bones. If you or a loved one took Truvada, Viriad, Atroplus, Stribild, or Complera and then suffered from kidney disease, kidney failure, bone fractures, osteoporosis, osteopenia, or osteomalacia, call the lawyers at Davis & Crump right now to see if you're eligible for a cash award and medical expenses. If you or a loved one took any of these medications and were then diagnosed with kidney disease, kidney failure, bone fractures, bone density loss, or softening of the bones, call Davis & Crump right now to see if you're eligible for a cash award and medical expenses. Our first consultation is free, and we don't get paid unless you get paid. Call Davis & Crump right now. Operators are standing by.
8 years ago, my daughter called to say she was expecting our first grandchild. But I never actually heard her say that. And the first time my granddaughter called me Papa, I didn't hear that one either. Can you imagine? Oh, I know I lost some of my hearing, but I was embarrassed, too stubborn to admit that. For Father's Day a few years ago, Gina and Ryan bought me a nano hearing aid. And my precious Ryan, I love hearing her call me Papa. I love hearing everything again.
What have you not heard by not wearing a hearing aid? You're going to have many more special moments in your life. Don't miss hearing a single one of them. Call Nano. Order your full pair of hearing aids for only $297.
1-800-259-1401.
Make today the day you finally start hearing better again with Nano hearing aids.
1-800-259-1401. 1-800-259-1401.
Need life insurance? SelectQuote found Jacob, 40, a $500,000 policy for only $19 a month. And SelectQuote found his wife Wendy, a $500,000 policy for only $17 a month.
Our secret? At SelectQuote, we aggressively comparison shop up to 10 highly rated companies to find you the company with the best rates. Why pay more? Give your family the security they need at a price you can afford. SelectQuote. We shop, you save.
And that is going to do it for us tonight. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Tomorrow evening, we're going to have a special for you on the state of immigration at the border. We'll go on both sides of the wall to see who's trying to get here and the reactions from some of the folks on the American side as well. All that and much more coming up tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on RFL.
Are you over the age of 50 and considering buying an annuity in the next 60 days? I have some important news for you. Don't buy an annuity until you understand the pros and cons of annuities. Call now for this free book on maximizing your income in retirement.